Sancta Caterina Alexandrina, Slovaquiae Regia Draconia, Ora pro nobis.
You may recall the video I released calling for all military minds, and it has borne some fruit. A U.S. Marine friend of mine has given me much advice about the founding of the Order of the Knights of Saint Michel. To protect his identity, I have given him the code name Demetz, for he is a Joan of Arc devotee as well, and has been on pilgrimage to several sites in France, which are quite important in the life of La Pucelle. He has also written the following call to arms. Welcome to the battle, my fellow soldiers. Make no mistake, we are at war, both spiritually and physically. We fight for the safety and preservation of all Christians in the modern world, but beyond just Christianity itself, for the Western way of life. Some scholars in academic circles will debate whether Western civilization actually exists. I am not concerned with that, nor should you be. The Western way of life is rooted in European traditions, the Enlightenment, and of course, religious philosophy. Anybody who says otherwise is wrong. This does not mean we deny influences from what we call the East Asia, Asia Minor, even the Islamic world. We acknowledge influence from around the globe, but the Western way of life is based in and steeped with an integration of toleration. Go ahead and read Voltaire on the subject of religious toleration. However, that toleration is now being used against us. Our tolerant way of life is being weaponized to persecute us, with self-flagellance apologizing for crimes that no human alive has ever committed against another being. We are told, as Western peoples, regardless of color or creed, that we are responsible for all the woes in the world, while simultaneously being expected to protect everybody. If this makes you angry, I understand. If it makes you scared, I understand. However, the most important question we must ask ourselves is not whether we are scared or angry, but what are we going to do about it? The answer, though simple, is difficult. We must go to war. The idea of war and the battlefields of the First and Second World War echo in our minds a grave distinction of not just religious warfare, but ideological warfare. We must partake in a different type of warfare, a war for culture. The battle space takes place in online communities, in papers, in academia, in media, in writing, in speech, in action, in religion, in all aspects of life, all the way down to the dating market of the Western world. It extends to people acting not out of righteousness or holiness, but out of sin, lust, and hedonistic living that has become synonymous with liberty and freedom. We must understand that only through responsibility and an effort to live a moral life are the answers for this cause found. One of the greatest adversaries to the Western world is the West itself. It is not Islam. It is from within that we destroy ourselves, just like ancient Rome, just like ancient China, just like any other empire or massive civilization with central ties. It all comes down to people no longer caring about the society in which they live. We are also at war with the rise of authoritarianism and fascism within our Western values. Although democracy is not the norm around the world, in the 20th and 21st century it became so, through hard work and massive bloodshed. We believe our Americanism, our Western virtues, are synonymous with liberty. However, liberty is also synonymous with Christian thinking. even though those who study the Enlightenment like to think it is devoid of Christian influence. The reality is that Christian thinking has permeated the West and created the philosophies and ideals of love, art, and music that we have today. To separate Christian thinking and Christian culture from Western culture entirely is false. We, as soldiers in this war, must understand that our part to play will take on both a spiritual role and a non-physical combat role, engaging in debates and discussions, being forward and upfront with our beliefs and values, and teaching them to others. This channel will also address the physical realities of this war. Defending oneself, and more importantly, bringing together groups for our collective safety and security. This is not a discussion about creating a crusade to conquer some holy land, or creating a final solution to destroy a race of people we do not like. This is not about eugenics. This is simply about survival, but not just survival. We seek to create a new, thriving community of Western thinkers who believe in the power and values of the West without sacrificing them on the altar of self-aggrandizement disguised as self-flagellation. We owe it to our future selves, our families, and everyone born and unborn in this world to continue the Western way of life. It is our job to bring the fight to the enemy, no matter what form it takes. Most importantly, we fight against religious tyrants and theocrats who would use their power against our principles. If Christian theocrats were crashing airplanes into buildings, blowing up bombs and creating havoc around Europe, I would oppose them. And we would need to oppose those people. However, the main physical threats do not come from Christians. Only the ideological threats of passivity and evangelicalism that fail to defend other Christian peoples. The main threat comes from not all Muslims, mind you, but there is a large contingent of people in the world who identify with Islam and wish to destroy the Western way of life. They have a serious list of grievances with the West, particularly due to support for Israel as a holy state that goes against the very notion of their people. They might have some legitimate claims. However, the answer is not to kill Israeli children, nor is it to enter Western countries under the guise of asylum, take over and displace populations that have lived there because they are no longer interested in maintaining their own society. This will continue as long as people do not want to assimilate into the culture they are joining, but rather take over. Our mission is not to destroy these people, but to remove them from our countries and send them back to where they came from. Or, if they are not compliant, we might have to defend ourselves against various kinds of unemployed, unsupervised young military-aged men who are on the loose creating grooming and rape gangs, hurting our women and children. Make no mistake, we are at war with an ideology of apathy. It wears the guise of empathy, but it is really just apathy. We belong to a world of keyboard warriors. People believe social justice is just about standing on claims they have no business standing on, grandstanding on ideas and issues they have no place in understanding because they have not done the research. The reality is this: we must stand against the tyrant in whatever formation it takes. It is not just a dragon. It is a multi-headed Lernaean hydra. If you cut off one head, multiple heads will form. How do you combat such a foe? In this channel, we will discuss multiple ways to do so, both spiritually and physically. I hope we can continue to have a great discussion about very interesting and practical ideas while identifying who our allies are and who our enemies are. Let us not be vague about this. Let us be very accurate about our enemies and our allies. It is not about vague concepts anymore. We need to get literal, understand and target people who are trying to hurt our way of life. Whether the rules of engagement allow us to go after these people is neither here nor there. We must not act in premeditation of hurting another person, but only in self-defense. Only then can we surely stand in our righteousness. There are many things we can do that are non-lethal. Learning situational awareness, learning when to go and where to run for safety, learning alternative routes in case of fire, earthquakes, other natural disasters, or deliberate arson. Know what places to avoid and which places are safe. Understand where your hotspots are, where criminal activity takes place. Know who to call and how to identify criminal behavior. Familiarize yourself with practical self-defense techniques, including desperate grappling, running away from situations, wearing closed-toed shoes instead of open-toed shoes, wearing types of armor, and carrying some sort of non-lethal weapon that you cannot get in trouble for. You must understand the various areas and what you are allowed to carry and not carry. And if things are so bad, understand that you might have to deal with cold, hard reality and carry some sort of illegal weapons in order to defend yourself, because the world is so screwed up that you cannot even defend yourself with your own justice system. Understand when to take life and how to take life. We call this discipline. Understand how to create physical fitness, spiritual fitness, and mental fitness. Educate yourself on what it takes to avoid danger, what things to understand, what things to read, what places to go. Learn practical applications of various tools such as pepper spray, bear spray, and batons for self-defense against joints. Learn how to use knives. Wear some sort of padded armor underneath your clothing to help protect you against bladed weapons. To protect your abdomen. Know where you can deploy various shields. Learn to invest money in certain equipment and what not to invest in. Learn the rules of engagement in your town, city, village, or country. Learn how to get legal representation to defend yourself when you eventually go to court. Because, believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, the enemy is using the legal system against you. And they do not care how they hurt you. They just are going to do it. We have to learn to use the tools of our enemies against them. Dominate that space and influence and push these people back to the holes from which they came. Make no mistake, evil does not look like a fantasy creature such as an orc, easily identifiable with dark skin or claws. Sometimes evil looks like something holy or good or better than you. Sometimes evil looks like a young man who violated a woman and is getting away with it, made a martyr in the eyes of the media to get ratings for themselves. Sometimes evil looks like various forms of manipulation to control you, to push you down, to stop your movements and your communication. Evil looks like laws benefiting one group of people over another, all under the guise of progress. The most important thing we must realize is that we are at war with ourselves first and foremost. Erasmus talked about this in his handbook for the Christian militant, or the Christian knight. He discussed how we must first understand the spiritual warfare within ourselves, and that people who are called to the gospel, to prayer, and to religious life are not people of holy origin, but normal, everyday people who occupy various parts of life. This, of course, was easier to understand when life was stratified into caste systems. Now, it is not. I myself was in the United States Marine Corps for 5 years. I served in Asia in both an office garrison capacity and out in the field, where I braved many dangers and survived. I wouldn't consider myself someone who engaged in what you might call combat, although there were moments where we had to defend ourselves against aggressors, and we came out on top. The overwhelming fire superiority and violence we attributed to the people who attacked us blew my mind, changing my thinking about violence in general, and made me realize that there is no such thing as a fair fight. There is only this: will you win or not? A very fundamental truth. We must understand that many people who have come before us, many different thinkers, activists, warriors, soldiers, and fighters who stood for freedom, who fought with their beliefs, all of them understood a fundamental truth. They would rather die than live under the heel of someone else's persecution or someone else's laws that would destroy their way of life. We share that in common with the so-called Islamic freedom fighters. We share that sentiment with them. They believe they are persecuted, that they have a list of grievances, and that their holy books and ideology give them the right to do terrible things to other groups of people. They believe they have a right to massacre. We are dealing with a level of barbarism being forgiven and overlooked by the larger world community because they do not want to deal with the harsh reality of what it means to confront these people. The reality is that war will ultimately end in killing people for territory, for power, but ultimately for something greater than we understand. Some might call this a holy war. Some might call this ethnic cleansing. Some might call it genocide. But the reality is that human beings have been killing each other since time immemorial. Long before there was religion. Long before there was any understanding of what God was. Long before any understanding of territories or borders. Thomas Hobbes, in his book Leviathan, discussed the great war against all that exists between all of humanity. In order to live inside society, we must give up our responsibility of violence to allow certain people to attribute that to others on our behalf. This is the very first level of civilization. Rousseau, on the other hand, believed that we lived in some sort of peaceful paradise. A very Christian notion, living in some sort of Garden of Eden in a primordial human state, and that we did not have property and that property was the source of all evil. But the reality is that property, whether it be self-possession or material goods, ultimately requires a soul to have. In other words, we must have a soul to have rights. Evidence of this is what we have an entire field of study called psychology. The word psyche itself roughly translates to spirit or soul. In other words, we are at war with the soul, the personality, the psyche of our culture. We must understand that we must fight for it. Not for our own sake, not just for the sake of our children, but for the people who are yet to arrive. I have no problem with people who have other ideologies. Issue with them as long as they live by the tenets of freedom and toleration. If you can no longer tolerate people and believe you have a right to kill them wholesale, then you have no right to exist. Because you are not interested in coexistence. You are interested in dominance. You must understand that we are not interested in dominance for the sake of dominance, nor to conquer. We are interested in dominating our enemy so they can no longer use their ideologies to persecute and destroy what our ancestors worked so hard to preserve. The eyes of history are upon us. It is up to us to do what is absolutely necessary and practical in order to preserve our Western way of life. Otherwise, we will be complicit in its downfall. With liberty and freedom, and here we have someone walking two dogs. So, hello. You see why I'm generally soft-spoken when I speak and film. I must not yield to any rights of love, for my profession's sacred from above. When I have chased all my foes from hence, then will I think upon a recompense. Henry VI, Act 1, Scene 3. I didn't tell you the speaker.